Hello and welcome. My name is Nicholas Hall, founder and president of Graham's Foundation. I am your host for today's Preemie Parent Chat with Melissa Harris. Melissa is a mom to two, including 24-weeker Sam and head of operations at Pinwheel Agency. I founded Graham's Foundation in 2009 in memory of my son, who died as a result of his premature birth. Our mission is to inform and guide parents of preemies so that they may confidently navigate the journey of prematurity. We provide support through our care package program, our Preemie Parent Mentor Program, the My Preemie mobile app, and our online community. So with that, I'd like to welcome Melissa.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. How are you today?
I am hanging in there.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
No,
So, yeah, so Melissa, I want to share just a little bit more about, if we could, with our Preemie Parent audience, a little bit more about your background and your bio. So, originally an Oakland, California native, and I believe you still reside in Oakland as
I
well?
am. I'm one of those rare people that I am from Oakland and live in Oakland.
Awesome. And so, so you've got your daughter Irene,
Yep,
who's 17 and finishing up high school.
she is. She is graduating in, good Lord, less than a month and heading off to college in the fall.
Awesome. That's got to be exciting and nerve-wracking.
Exactly, a little bit of both. Yes.
Yeah. And then your son, Sam, who's 12.
Yep.
And as a result of his premature birth, you got to join the preemie parent community.
I did. It's funny. Irene was the one that had to be evicted at 42 weeks, and Sam was the one who at 24 weeks was like, actually at 23 weeks was ready to enter the world. And I kind of held on to him to make it to that 24-week mark. But yeah, so he is the reason I am part of the micro preemie community.
So, so curious. So your daughter was smart, by the way. She's like, this is nice in here. This is good. Got everything I need.
Yep.
Got a roof over my head. I'm well fed every day, but okay. I'm okay. I guess it's so was had to be forced out. But your son, so your son Sam, as I understand it, I want to talk a little bit about your book, 1 pound, 12 ounces. As I understand it, getting pregnant with Sam was a bit of a journey
It
in and of
was.
itself.
So, I suffered from secondary infertility, which I did not even know was a thing.
Yeah, I didn't know that. What? I don't even know what does that. What does that mean for those of us that have never heard of it, including
So,
myself?
what it means is that despite the fact that I got pregnant quite easily with Irene, I actually, as my fertility doctor put it, he didn't believe that I actually conceived Irene naturally and easily. He kept joking with me, there's no way that she's mine. And I was like, I can bring her in. She looks just like me. Like, I promise you.
Immaculate conception.
Exactly. And, I had a lot of issues that led to the fertility issues. I had a bicornuate uterus. I had a tilted uterus. I had my personal favorite phrase, an incompetent cervix.
The old incompetent, yes.
Yeah, which, we really need to work on this terminology because that one
tilted, incompetent.
Yeah.
It sounds like a pinball.
It's spectacular. And so I had to go through full fertility treatment. I had 9 hysteroscopies, which, as I describe them, it's like a regular pap smear on steroids. So it's a minor surgical procedure, and it is to create one uniform uterus. So it's to get rid of the bicornuate uterus, which is basically having a heart-shaped uterus with 2 chambers. Which is why my doctor felt that I was having so much trouble getting pregnant. It's also the reason he thinks that I couldn't give birth to Irene easily and had to evict her because she could, I always joked when I was pregnant with her, I was lopsided. And it's because I was actually lopsided. She was stuck on one side.
Yeah.
And so I had to get a uniform chamber, and then I didn't ovulate. I mean, there was just a lot of complications. So I went through IUI, not IVF, but the good old turkey baster method.
Yes.
Was finally
I
able to.
I know that one. Yep.
Yeah. I had multiple miscarriages prior to Sam, including losing twins in the second trimester. And when I finally was pregnant with Sam, it was a very high risk pregnancy. And anytime there was any sort of spotting, I would be put on bed rest. And at 23 weeks and I think 2 days, I had a little bit of spotting, and I went into the hospital to be checked, and I was 8 centimeters dilated. The gestational sac was protruding, and I was contracting every 2 minutes. And so they put me into Trendelenburg, so tilted back at a 30-degree angle, basically using gravity to keep him in. And I laid like that for 6 days, hooked up to magnesium sulfate. And
that's good stuff, right?
Oh, no, it's not.
I
It
know.
is.
It's
It's
I know.
wonderful for what it can do.
Right. Yeah.
But the sweats, the headaches, all of it. So I laid at that for 6 days until Sam made it to 24 weeks and 2 days. And they decided it was, at this point, the gestational sac started coming out again, this time with part of the umbilical cord in it. And it was now more dangerous to keep him in than to take him out. And so he was born 24 weeks, 2 days, weighed 1 pound, 12 ounces. And we spent 95 days in the NICU here at Alta Bates Hospital in Berkeley.
Yeah.
And, it was a remarkable experience for us, because considering his early birth, he was actually pretty unremarkable as a preemie. I mean, he had yes, we had to have a PDA ligation, so heart surgery to close his PDA. He had ROP, so retinopathy of prematurity, and had laser surgery.
But he had he had, like, when you open the Preemie book and you start going through all the possibilities of what might be, what could be. That's not, as a parent that's gone through that same experience and knows what all the possibilities look like. That's a lot to be grateful for. And like 95 days, that's like light. I'm sure, again, a lot, if people haven't been through the experience before, they would think 95 days, wow. But that's actually quite a good, again, plenty of early preemies there for 4, 5, 6 months and longer. So
we actually made it home before his due date, which what we're told is that is not, the goal is to make it home around your actual due date. And we made it home about 2 weeks before his due date. And part of that is he just, yes, we had to have the 2 surgeries, but overall it was just fattening up and getting him to learn how to regulate his body temperature. He started nursing, about 35 weeks.
Wow.
He was pretty remarkable in there, and has continued to be. He is now the same height as his 17-year-old sister. We found that out actually 2 days ago. We haven't told her. We're waiting for her to get through her last AP class before we let her know this, because it's going to depress her to no end that he is now as tall as her. But he's a pretty remarkable kid, considering.
That's fantastic. I'm curious, you talked about a lot, some of the issues that you faced to become pregnant with Sam. Are we, your bio shares single mom to Irene and Sam. I'm curious, were you, because part of what we want to talk about here is the impact of prematurity and challenges with pregnancy as it impacts our own personal health and well-being, but also how it impacts our relationships. I'm curious, were you single at the time?
No, so married at the time, both kids have the same father. Things were with my marriage were pretty good up until some of the fertility issues started coming in. Fertility issues do definitely put a strain on a marriage. I have to say that unless your marriage is in really good shape, having your spouse give you shots in the butt on a consistent basis is not really great for the marriage. Having the pressure of, reproductive, timing when you can have sex and the thermometers and being on a stick and going, oh, I'm fertile today, we have to have sex today, is just, it's a strain. And then miscarriages are really hard. And I think one of the things that people forget is they're really hard on the person who miscarries, but they're also really hard on the partner as well. And it's hard for both people to be in it and support each other, because I know that at least on the second miscarriage, so the first miscarriage was at 8 weeks and was a lot less traumatic in some ways, because it was early on. And, I wasn't showing, not a lot of people knew. And we were able to sort of go through that one together. The second miscarriage, I miscarried one twin and then miscarried the second twin a few weeks later. And for me in particular, that miscarriage was really, really difficult physically and mentally. And for my ex-husband, he had a very hard time being supportive of me, and it was all about him. And I think that was really hard on both of us, and we lost the ability to support each other. And it really drove a wedge in some ways between us, because we were both suffering, and I felt unsupported by him, and he probably felt quite unsupported by me. And because miscarriage is such a thing that a lot of people suffer in private, we didn't have supportive friends out there because people don't talk about miscarriage.
Yeah.
And then when Sam was born early, I was in the hospital.
I am curious, if you don't mind. So you had the second miscarriage, but you continued on.
I did. Yeah, we did.
Right. So do you feel that it was kind of you were at a place like this, maybe again, in 2020 hindsight, looking back, but do you feel like you were just so, despite the miscarriage, that you were so sort of just so focused and so committed that you were just gonna, is that your personality type? You're gonna
I was tunnel visioned. I was going to have a second kid. And I think in some ways, my husband, who was an only child, probably would have been happy to have stopped at one. And I, who come from I have a brother, I have a sibling. I wanted two. And I think I'm very stubborn, and I just was like, no, I'm having two kids. And I just pushed. And I will say that when I became pregnant with Sam, I knew that was it. I was either going to walk away with a child or not. And I was not going to try again, because I knew mentally I definitely could not handle losing this child and then trying again. It would have been too much for me. It would have been too much for my parents. Definitely too much for Irene, who at that point, she was when almost 5 when Sam was born. So she was aware of what was going on. She was aware of the twin pregnancy. And it wouldn't have been fair to her either. But yeah, I mean, I think I forged ahead because I'm a stubborn person.
Did you have did either of you get any support or therapy or any sort of intervention? Was it,
I
was there anything kind of I'm just kind of curious, sort of during that time. I can just, yeah.
I definitely did. After the twin miscarriage, I found a therapist who specialized in pregnancy issues. Actually, I was seeing her before I had the miscarriage because,
Mm,
again, going through fertility issues, every month that you're not pregnant feels like a failure.
yeah. Yeah.
And when you go through fertility testing and your partner is told, well, you're fine, all the issues with getting pregnant were mine,
Mm,
his swimmers were fine, it was my problem. So every single month I felt like I had failed. And so
mm,
I was in therapy already with somebody who specialized in reproductive um, you know infertility and pregnancy issues. And so after the twin miscarriage, I remember my first session with her after I miscarried the second twin, and I walked in, I said hello, I cried for 45 minutes straight, I said goodbye, and I left. And that was literally the only two words I said the whole session. And I saw her all through, um, between miscarrying and then after having Sam. I also stayed with her through the NICU experience as well, as much as I could, because
yeah.
you know you have to deal with your own mental health through this, because it's a lot.
Now, how about for um, your former husband? Did
Unfortunately, he
he?
did not. No, and I think that's part of the problem. I think part of why we had troubles is he didn't deal with his own issues. And so he looked to me to be his support. And I had enough on my own plate that
Yeah.
I needed him to have support, and he just didn't get the help that he needed, which was unfortunate.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, one thing I would definitely say to anyone who's listening is therapy is great. Go to therapy. Talk to someone, because the more you have a impartial person to talk to, the better you will feel, and the better you will be able to support your partner, and the better your partner will be able to support you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have, of course, at Grams, we have a mentor program. So, and I think it's great to have, if family and friends can be helpful, but if they
Yeah.
can't really empathize, if they haven't been through it before, it's limited in the help and the
Yeah.
support that they can provide.
Yeah. I
And
mean, this is
how about, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Melissa.
I was just going to say, I mean, fertility, miscarriage, and premature birth is it's a different experience. And having someone you can talk to who has gone through it
Mm,
is vital, because having someone say, I get it,
yeah.
really, really helps, because it's unlike anything anyone has ever experienced. And it's really helpful to have someone understand, like, I mean, one of the things that got me through, at least in the NICU, is I made friends with another NICU mom. And if she got it, when I would say to her, like, damn, they're at, like, not having kidney beans in the cafeteria for my salad at lunch would upset me to no end. And it was silly and it was petty, but it was like something I felt that mattered. And if I would say it to her, she's like, she got it. She understood. It's because I
Mm,
could control nothing inside the NICU, but it was
mm,
like I felt like it was something I could control, because I could eat the kidney beans and I'd have some iron and some protein.
yeah.
And so if I said that to her, she'd be like, oh, I get it, I'm sorry. Versus you say that to somebody else and like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there's something really important about having someone who
Mm.
understands and gets the, like, what you're living through.
So you share on some of the impacts of the NICU on the marriage. That time spent in the NICU can divide.
Yeah.
I guess did you that was your that was the experience that you felt for yourself in your marriage?
Yeah. So for me, I was in the NICU. I was there every day. I would,
Mm,
the first month I wasn't allowed to drive. So I was sort of at the mercy of who could take me there and pick me up. But basically, I would get there. We would get my daughter to kindergarten and pick her up from aftercare. So I would be in the NICU from 8 to 5. And oftentimes I would go back in the evenings
mm,
and I was always there.
mm,
And my ex-husband was almost never there. And so, you know, it there was this divide of things. And yes, he kind of took on being more present for our daughter and he was working whereas I was on leave. But there was definitely a divide where the pressure and the tension and the emotional roller coaster of the NICU was on me. And then, I would come home and he'd get home from work and he'd be like, "Well, where's dinner?" Or, "Why are you so tired? You didn't work all day." And I'm like, "No, instead I watched our son get bagged." Or, I watched him desat 6 times, or I pumped and wasn't allowed to hold him because he was unstable today.
yeah.
And so it felt like a very divided thing that he wasn't as invested. And in fact, he didn't hold our son for 2
Mm,
months. And the only reason he finally held him is I ambushed him. I told him to go to the NICU as opposed to coming home. And I arranged with the nurse that when he got there, she basically said, "Sit down, take your shirt off," and explain nothing. And he was like, "Okay." And he sat down and unbuttoned his shirt and she just put Sam on him. And he was like, "Well, okay, I'm holding him." And that
mm.
was the first time he held him since he had been born. And he was almost 2 months old at the time.
Did
Um,
any? I'm curious. Did anybody while he wasn't? What's your ex-husband's name, by the way? It's nice to
Peter.
Peter. So, did anybody when Peter was in the NICU, did anybody approach him to see how he was doing or how he was feeling, or
Yeah,
and just curious, or if you don't recall, that's understandable. But
I
I'm just
think
kind of
so. So there's a social worker assigned to every case in the NICU, especially for the micro preemies.
yeah,
And our social worker, Misty, was very present. And so I
yeah,
know she did reach out. And our main primary nurse, Laura, who I still keep in touch with at least. She was very much like, would check in and be like, "Where's Peter? Peter, what are
yeah,
you up to? Peter, you need to learn how to do this."
right,
And would, definitely try to involve him for sure
yeah,
when he was there. But it was interesting because like my parents were more present in the NICU than he was.
mm,
And I don't know if it's that he felt that he needed to be more present for Irene, if he was scared, if he, felt that if he was there, he was taking time away from me being able to be with Sam. I'm not really sure what it was, um, but it definitely put the whole NICU um, emotional roller coaster more on me than on him, which
and I
was hard.
think, and is it, Melissa, is it fair to say that there were? I mean, it sounds like that maybe there were some. This is. Do you feel like the premature birth and NICU stay and the fertility? That was it. Do you feel was the cause of the for you? Do you feel like it was the cause of the breakdown of your relationship, or did it maybe sort of heighten, expedite, or create the environment, if you will, to really to put it, to sort of put the pressure on where maybe there already were some challenges.
I think it highlighted the cracks in the relationship, and the foundation was already kind of rocky during the fertility, and the NICU stay made it really rocky. And then Sam has since been diagnosed with autism, and the management of that diagnosis and Sam's therapies also fell to me. And we had a very rocky foundation at that point, and that broke. And so it definitely expedited things. I think having an equal partner through all of it would have actually, if we were on equal footing, then the NICU experience would have strengthened us because we would have been equal. But because things were rocky, it's hard when you've got a medical crisis and you're not equal. I mean, that's just sort of what it boils down to, is that if it all falls to one person, it's gonna just make things harder.
Yeah. So tell me about, so you wrote the book 1 pound, 12 ounces. Can you share with a little bit about the inspiration?
Sure.
Well, we know about the inspiration. We know Sam is the inspiration, but is there, in terms of the book itself, maybe the message that your intention of with the book, what you're love for you to share with the audience, and we'll be sure when we post this interview, we'll be sure and post a link to the book so folks can check it out. But if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about the inspiration and what you're hoping to share with it.
So when I had Sam, I was clueless. I knew nothing about the premature experience. I was not prepared. And I sought out anything and everything I could. And I struggled to find anything out there that wasn't either it's God's will, or I'm a medical professional who had a preemie, and here is what I'm going to write about prematurity. And so I am not a medical professional, and I do not believe it's God's will. And so I wanted to basically put something out there that people just want to know, like, what is it really like? And remind people that they're not alone, and to kind of bring prematurity a little bit out of the shadows. I think a lot of people, prematurity is much more common than people realize. I think, what is it, 1 in 8 births in the United States is a premature birth. So it's way more common than you realize. And a lot of people go through it alone. And as you can tell, I'm not really shy about talking about things. And so I just thought it was really important to tell the story as raw and as honestly as possible, so that someone might find comfort in it and might see themselves in it, or might learn something. So when they find out their sister or their cousin or their friend is going through it, they might not be so afraid, or they might be more open to saying, hey, I know this is hard, so I'm here. Let me know. That was really what pushed me to do it.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you're right. When fertility, if you start to add up, folks that have issues with fertility, with miscarriage, with premature birth, with basically trauma around getting pregnant and a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby, it's far, far more common. But to your point, it's something that we just don't talk about enough. I think that's right. And I was just I was on a little road trip, and my car broke down, and I was riding in the tow truck with a young man, and just chit-chatting before we dropped the car off at the service place. And I ended up sharing that I was on a trip to exhibit for Graham's Foundation, and sure enough, his sister had a 32-weeker just about a year ago. Yeah, and I wouldn't have expected that a young man towing my truck would have had any idea what the work of Graham's Foundation supporting parents of premature babies. But even he knew what I was talking about. So
it's amazing how many people out there have in some way, shape, or form a connection to prematurity, to miscarriage, pregnancy loss, and infertility. I mean, and people just don't talk about it enough, which is why so many women in particular feel alone when they go through it. And I don't see why. I mean, talk about it. I am happy. I will tell anyone that wants to hear about my journey. I tell them because it happened. And I'm not ashamed of it. It's important. And it has brought, I have made many new friends through it. I have been able to talk to other people that have gone through it and brought them some comfort. One of my favorite stories. So, I wrote a blog through the whole NICU experience because that was
you and me.
It was my therapy. It was, I would come home. All of this information is thrown at you and you're like, I don't know what to do with it. So I would write about it. And the hospital PR people heard about it. And then they asked me if I would film a commercial with them to talk about, my experience with the hospital. And a couple who went into labor at 24 weeks that lived about 100 miles away from the hospital saw the commercial and had gone to their local hospital, and they said, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do for you. You're going to lose the baby. And the husband said, hey, that hospital where that lady had the commercial, we're going there. They drove 100 miles past all these other hospitals that could have, helped them to go to Alta Bates, and their baby made it home alive and healthy because of me telling my story. And it's like, if you can save one life or help one person by telling your story, then do it,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you also, you talked about that you started blogging. For those folks out there, blogging, do people still blog? They do, I know, but it was definitely like the thing 10, 15 years ago. And that's how that is one of the ways that I sort of supported myself mentally through the whole journey. And I do think it's important for us to recognize that we all have different ways of sort of coping and supporting. Some people like to collect data, some people like to talk, some people like to write, some people like to read. And some people really enjoy like peer support as well. And so we, at Graham's, we're not trying to be everything for everybody, but we are trying to have, a few options for parents. And but it's just, I think it's just so critical that to acknowledge that it's a traumatic event. And I think you talked about your last point of having a preemie. It is traumatic, and it can bring parents together or pull you apart. I think also as an individual, depending on kind of how you view it, I certainly recognize the challenge, of losing my son and the months in the NICU with my daughter and all the ups and downs since then, but it also can provide you with such a gift, and it really is kind of it's really up to us. It's how we want to look at it. We have the power of our own perspective, and I'm grateful for that. I really am.
No, I mean, for me, my NICU experience has definitely, it's brought some amazing people into my life. The friend that I met in the NICU, she is one of my closest friends in the world now. We've been through the NICU experience. We've been through divorce together. Our daughters are graduating high school from the same high school together, and they're going to college in the same state together. And, we've lost our moms to the same disease a couple years apart. I mean, we are just attached at the hip. And the nurses and the staff at the hospital have become very important in my life. And I think it has shifted my perspective on a lot of things. I have learned a lot more, I think, patience from it, and perspective and gratitude. No, I would not wish the NICU on anyone. But now that I am through it and to the other side, and I have the perspective on it, it was an experience that has changed me in good ways. And I can see that now.
That's fantastic. It's really great. Melissa, before we wrap up, is there anything else? Because I know we could talk forever. This is obviously something that you're very passionate about, and we appreciate that. Is there anything else that you'd want to share with the parents that are out there listening to us today?
I think if you're going through the experience now, the most important thing I would tell people is just find what your outlet is, whether it's collecting the data, whether it's writing, whether it's talking, but find where you can get that relief and use it. That this is hard, and it's hard on both of you. And just remember that you are both going through it. And while one may not seem like they're going through it in the same way, they're still going through it. And it's important to remember that.
Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me. You bet. Before we wrap up today, I want to take a moment to thank Sage Therapeutics and Biogen for their underwriting of today's Preemie Parent Chat. And just a big thank you to our Preemie Parent community for placing your trust in us to provide you with information and guidance to help you confidently navigate the journey of prematurity.